Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Women's Soccer Show. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Allie.
And we're going to jump right into it. We have a big weekend of football. We had the Gold Cup final on Sunday. And, of course, we had the Women's FA Cup all weekend. We're going to talk Gold Cup. We're going to talk FA Cup. And we've got a couple really big news points to talk about. I love when we get to include just news points. These two are going to be, I would say, more of a disappointment, but I think it's important that we highlight them, and I think it's really good for everybody to hear them, because one of them specifically hasn't gotten, any airtime.
Yeah, they're too big for News in 10. They're things that we need to get into the meat of, so not the greatest of news, but we have to talk about them.
All right, let's get into it.
So it was, of course, the Gold Cup finale. It was the final. It was the USA versus Brazil. First off, they need a new name for it because the Gold Cup in England is a racehorse, and so every time that you try and search for it, you just get the horse race, and I'm like, this is not what I wanted.
Listen, though, if we're going to talk names, there's all the good names are taken. If you want to search for the WSL, you can't just search WSL because the Surfing League comes up, and now with a USL Super League, you can't search Super League. It's all going to combine into one at some point.
It's all going to merge. But we have to talk about it because, of course, it was the end of CONCACAF. Spoiler alert for anybody who doesn't know, but the USA took it 1-0.
Back on top, baby.
I woke up with 143 notifications on my phone.
They weren't all from me, for the record.
No.
They were not.
No, they weren't. But it was a moment. It was a moment, so let's talk about it. Thoughts at first, Sarah, as the game as a whole. What did you think?
Well, I did add the back on top just to be the most annoying US fan that I could muster. But if we're talking the game as a whole, listen, it wasn't the greatest of finals. It wasn't the best performance from either team. Brazil has done better across. Honestly, I think this probably was Brazil's arguably worst performance across the entire tournament. And the U.S. has played better in this tournament as well. But that being said, it was a great clash. It was a great matchup. And I think a lot of what we saw was, number one, the effects of the semifinals and the two very different semifinals, which we can dive into. And two, just two teams that look very different from the last time they saw each other, trying to figure each other out. And it was a bit of a chess match. And we saw that across the game from start to finish. The game really evolved and changed. And the team that won was the team that could evolve and change within the game.
Yep, no, 100% agree. Let's talk about the US first off, because looking at the lineup, it was interesting. It was not what you would consider a standard lineup for the US. So did you have any, fears seeing that going in?
It was interesting because, when they release the lineups, they just release it in a list numerically ordered. And so you've no idea what formation they're looking at. When I saw it, I was like, okay, this might be a 4-2-2-2. Try out that box midfield again, which I really liked. It could be a 4-3-3. And what it ended up being was kind of like a 4 with almost a diamond in the middle. But Roosevelt really was playing on that wing. Which we've seen them trying Lavelle at the wing a lot throughout this tournament. Really just trying to find a place for her on the field that isn't in the center mid is how it seems, honestly. It really does seem like, okay, the coaches have figured out that Roosevelt and Lindsay Horan just don't connect well together on the field. And so now it's a question of who's going to play in the center mid and who's not. And they've chosen that Lindsay Horan's going to play in the center mid, and let's see if we can find a different spot for Roosevelt to impact the game. I don't think it's her best position. I don't think she's that impactful there. Certainly not as much as she could be. So it was a curious one. But I think across the board, this also, I think, was a reflection probably of tired legs from that massive semifinal game, 120 minutes in puddles. And it's exhausting on your legs. So I do think this was probably also a reflection of who's got the legs for this game. This might not have been the planned finals lineup. That's kind of what it looks like to me.
So as I hinted at the beginning, I didn't watch this game live. I woke up to many a message, but I did watch it on replay. And I said, I don't know if it's because I knew the result or what it was, but I'm going to say it wasn't the finest moment for both teams. definitely seen both teams play better. I will say at the very beginning, first half, I thought Brazil were on top and were on it and were giving you guys an insane game and like, yes, this is the matchup we wanted. Second half, it sort of petered out for them, and there was a couple of moments. We'll talk about it, but we'll talk about Kruger saving your backsides from having to go through the extra time penalties again.
Truly. Yeah, we'll come on to that. Let's put a pin in that. I agree with what you said about the halves, kind of, in a way. At the start of the game, absolutely, Brazil came out the strongest. And particularly for the first 10, 15, maybe even stretching to 20 minutes, I think we could really just see the difference between the semifinal games. Brazil played Mexico, in which Mexico played a player down for 2/3 of the game. And Brazil came out firing on all cylinders. They came out really in their flow. The U.S. played a game where they had to throw their tactics out the window and just say, let's play boot ball. And I think that was really evident in the first, 15, 20 minutes, because they came out and they were so out of sync, so out of rhythm. That could have been a case of the lineup, as we just alluded to, but I think more so than that, it was a case of, okay, let's try to re-find this in the game. And that's what shifted. I would argue Brazil were the better team for the first 30 minutes. It was pretty even by the end of the first half. The U.S. tucked away a goal before the end of the first half. And the difference was that the U.S. grew into this game. Brazil started strong, and they went the opposite direction. They just went downhill, which I think we also need to spend a moment on talking about what happened to Brazil.
Yeah, let's talk about Brazil, actually, because, like we said, they started off really well and really strong, and then I think you're right, they conceded the goal right at the end of the first half, which is always a hard one going into, because if you've got that mentality you're going in even, and then suddenly you're not going in even, it is a very hard mentality to come back from. And they were missing a very key person in Raffaele, who has broken her foot, so is out and is just a very key linchpin for the Brazilian team. So them missing that 100% didn't help. But it looked like they gave up, to be honest. Like, I got to 60, 70 minutes and I was like, are Brazil going to come back? Are they going to try? Are they going to do anything? They just sort of stopped playing.
For me, it didn't look like they gave up. They just didn't know what to do. They stopped playing. They weren't, as a team, they weren't playing as the Brazil that we'd seen throughout the tournament. I mean, they were so close to tying it, which we'll come on to. But Raffaele, yeah, I mean, what a defender she is. She really is the core of this defense. And we've talked about how Brazil's defense has improved in this tournament. And she's been a huge part of that and kind of the center building block of it. So to have her not there is not just a tactical loss, but a really big mental and emotional loss as well. And I do think that affected Brazil. Is that, is one player the reason for the loss? No, I think there's a lot of things that come into play here. And I think for Brazil, they came out really well. They came out looking like the Brazil we'd seen throughout the tournament. They were linking up passes. They were putting pressure on the U.S. And slowly but surely, it started to peter away. But you mentioned in the second half, that's when Brazil really plummeted. And I do think we can talk tactics, but I also think a big factor here is this was the first time in the tournament Brazil found themselves having to come back from behind. They were fully in control of every game they'd played. I mean, there were tight games, but on that pitch, they suddenly were not in control of the game. And I think that they're not sure how to play from behind at this point. They'll learn, but I think that really impacted them. They weren't comfortable in that position, and that turned them into almost panic mode. And that's when we saw the Brazil of old, where it was, how can we lean on, the talent of Debinha? How can we lean on the talent of Adriana? I think we also saw that in how they were really trying. They really wanted some dead ball penalties called. And that's fair, but they were having trouble scoring from the run of play. And that's why they wanted those penalties. They were drawing fouls because they knew they'd be dangerous off of those penalties. They were having a hard time linking up as a team. And once again, I think it's multiple. I think it's both of those factors combined that really did lead to their demise. But we have to give credit where credit is due as well to the United States.
No, we do. And I will. But I'm just going to say, I want to say it was a great tournament for Brazil. They have played some of the best football we have seen from them. They just fell at that final hurdle. It can only be good things, I hope, for Brazil, in the fact that we're seeing a Brazilian team rather than, like you said, that reliance on that star player, whether it was Marta of old or Dabinha and all that. And we're definitely seeing that. So I'm glad to see they got to the final. I'm glad to see that we're seeing that for Brazil. But you're right, we do need to give credit to the US, because the US, after a shaky 20 minutes, came out with a game plan and had a fantastic game plan and obviously managed to nick the goal and keep it and win. I do want to call out one player and then we'll talk about the US as a whole, because I want to talk about Corbin Albert. Corbin Albert has had a tournament, and I think she's sort of gone unnoticed by a lot of people in the women's football media, unless you know where to look. And she in this tournament was phenomenal and just ran that play in this final absolutely ragged. So 100% a star of both currently in the French league and also of the US national team.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that about Brazil, just to comment on that. Yeah, that has been the plight of them, leaning on the Marta or, the star. And they have moved away from that. And they will. What we've said about Brazil still holds true, even though they lost this final. They are moving in a really good direction. In regards to Corbin Albert and the U.S., I mean, I don't even remember what... I was probably for the quarterfinals that I probably mentioned it in our previous episode. I think I said just how key Corbin Albert has been, like you said, that linchpin for the U.S. And you're right. This is a name most people don't know, even in the United States, and specifically because A, she's very young. She doesn't have a lot of caps. And B, she's playing her football at PSG. So not really in the sight here for the U.S. And even me going into this tournament, I was very curious. I didn't know how she was going to fare, how many minutes she was going to get. And right from the start, she is calm, she is composed, and she is such a talented midfielder on the ball. And she is that linking box to box that we need. Lindsay Horan is not an 8. She is a 10. Corbin Albert is a true box to box number 8 center midfielder. And she's so adept at playing that role that can also pivot in to the 6 when they need a double pivot on defense. She really has been, like, at the end of the United States World Cup run, we said Emily Sonnet was the answer. Corbin Albert truly has been the answer, and I'll add on, and so has Sam Coffey. And those two in the center midfield have been not only good individually, but they've grown in working together as well. And I sincerely am so excited to watch them grow as a unit together in the center midfield. Their skills complement each other so well. And I just think Corbin Albert had a great tournament across the board. Sam Coffey grew into the tournament and had her best game in this final.
Couldn't agree more. So you're going to get your told you so in about Sam Coffey?
I am. Listen, I have to. And I'm sorry if it's annoying, but I believe that I said this in 2022. I was at Sam Coffey's first ever start for the U.S. Women's National Team, and I had my eyes locked on her basically the whole game. And I was so genuinely impressed because this is somebody who has the composure of the 6 that is needed on the ball and has the talent to work the ball around. She can play on the ball, passing with the defense, turning, playing forward. And not only that, but she can get stuck in as that number 6 and kind of be everywhere. The thing about Julie Ertz was how much ground she could cover. Sam Coffey is now proving that she can cover that much ground. That is so needed in this U.S. team. And look, she'd only had a few caps under her belt. Vlatko Andonovski did not call her into many more training camps after her first few appearances. I was always dumbfounded by that. I never understood why. He leaned heavily on other players that some are and some aren't in camp anymore. And there's not a right and a wrong. We're not going to go back and be like, well, if Sam Coffey had been called in 2022 and made the World Cup roster, things would have been different for the U.S. That's not what this is. I am just very happy that she is now getting the playing time she deserves to grow into a team, to merge and meld with this team and in these tactics. And now that she's getting the recognition she deserves.
Cheers to that. Let's talk about the goal. Let's talk about Haran's goal, because it was a gorgeous goal. It was beautiful. Let's be honest. Like, it wasn't a scuffed shot. It was something else.
I mean, speaking of Sam Coffey, that all started with Sam Coffey. Coffey played it down to Rodman, who, by the way, had also, I think, her best game of the tournament there. Rodman back to Emily Fox, and Emily Fox does what Emily Fox does best, and she plays a dime of a ball, a beauty of a cross to the back post, and Lindsay Horan just truly just beats her defender. It was a gorgeous goal. It really, really was. And you mentioned the timing of it for the U.S. I think that was so key for them to have grown into the game, and then in the dying minutes of the first half, get that really just propelled them forward to continue to grow into that second half.
Yeah, it is always timing. If you can get that late goal in the first half and go in on top, then it just changes all of your mentality.
Should we talk now about, we have to talk, Casey Kruger.
I was going to say, let's take the pin out of the Casey Kruger, who saved your guys' legs from another 30 minutes and possibly penalties, because what a clearance.
Oh my God. You could argue, obviously we're going to go down the what ifs again with this, but you really could argue that Casey Kruger just saved the game, because with the tired legs, who knows what could have happened in overtime, right? Brazil was starting to mount some more attacks. US is getting some tired legs. They're already coming in with tired legs. Hey, you never know what could have happened. So thank you, Casey Kruger. And what a moment for her. She comes in late in the game. That's always difficult. And she comes in on defense during the onslaught of the final attack for Brazil. And what she did, for those of you who didn't see, the ball was going in the net. It had beat Alyssa Nair, and Kruger just found herself in the right place at the right time, and a goal line clearance for Casey Kruger. Blessed Casey Kruger, and I guess this is a moment to also say another player that was arguably snubbed from the World Cup roster, who's been getting more chances and call-ups to this U.S. women's national team since then, and it's nice to see. Any final thoughts just on this game or about these two teams moving forward?
I was going to say the tournament. I want to talk about the tournament as a whole, very briefly, because I don't think this game was the best indicativeness of the tournament. I thought this tournament showed different teams having grown. We talked about it when we talked about Mexico and the US game, but Mexico, again, I thought they didn't just have that oomph to get past Brazil, but come again, next tournament, they're going to be firing on all cylinders, and they're going to have that power. And we're seeing it again from these like South American countries, that they're getting the investment and they're getting that progress and they're getting better because of this investment. And we're seeing it with this tournament. And you know what? It proved again by having it being the US versus Brazil. I mean, I know you guys played Canada in the semis, but it's nice to see that it's not just going to be US, Canada. Let's see who, sort of almost coin flip who's going to take it this year sort of thing. And we're actually seeing the growth of the game within this tournament. So that's what got me excited about this.
I totally agree. The growth of the game and the growth of the game within CONCACAF and all of these teams that hopefully with more games to play, more scheduled international games, maybe that will bring more investment to some of these teams that frankly are so good and can be so much better if their federation would actually just invest in what they deserve. But I'm so excited. I think this is just so good for the region as a whole to continue to grow. Let's go around the world. Around the world, around the world.
To Australia, and Western United have had their lead cut to a single point after a loss this weekend. Closest rivals Melbourne City managed a 2-0 win and are now hot on their heels.
Over to Germany, Bayern Munich got a much-needed win over the weekend to remain top and 4 points clear. Second place Wolfsburg played on Monday as we record, with hope to close that gap.
And finally to France, it was the Copa de France semi-finals this weekend. Both matches went down to penalties. Fleury held Lyon to a 0-0 draw and survived a nail-biting penalty shootout to win 5-4. The second semi-final was just as dramatic, with Paris FC coming from behind twice to keep PSG to a 3-3 draw. However, they lost the shootout 4-3. The final will take place on the 4th of May.
Have you checked out Total Football Analysis yet? TotalFootballAnalysis.com provides research analysis on loads of football, including the women's game. Want all the stats in one place instead of drowning in a mountain of tabs? Want to explore key matchups and the tactics from both teams? Total Football Analysis provides the stats and analysis to help you learn more about the beautiful game. We have a special discount for listeners of the Women's Soccer Show. At checkout, type WOSO10 to get a full year for just €10. That's €40 of the yearly subscription. Head over to TotalFootballAnalysis.com and type WOSO10 at checkout.
We are going to talk a little FA Cup, and then the majority of the rest of this episode, we're going to get into some news, including the Willie Kirk suspension and the Marta Cox news. But before we get into that, let's do a little bit on the FA Cup. We had FA Cup quarterfinals this past weekend. And two, I learned this from Amy, we call it Cupsets. Is that right, Allie?
Correct. Yes, that is correct. We had some Cupsets.
We had some Cupsets. Leicester City took down Liverpool 2-0, and Tottenham took down City in penalties. It was a tough week for City. They went down 1-0 to Chelsea in the Conti Cup semi-final, so they will be out of the Conti Cup on Thursday. And they got knocked out of the FA Cup on Sunday by Tottenham. Their only remaining hope for a trophy now is the league title.
I have to say, was giving Gareth Taylor a 3-year contract this early on in the season a little bit of a mistake?
I mean, you know I'm always going to say yes about that.
No, because I was talking about it with some of my Man City friends, and the problem is he's not won anything under, Man City. They've managed to... Oh, no, I think he may have won an FA Cup. He's managed to get them better this season, but is now the time to be giving him...
Yeah, a little preemptive.
The 3 extra years. It is a little preemptive because now he's not won any of the tournament trophies, and he's got to hope that Chelsea fluff up somewhere and they get the league. And then otherwise it's going to be another season of another trophyless season, and you've just signed him for 3 more years.
I agree. It was pretty preemptive, especially when the end of the season is pretty close, to be honest. And these tournaments are into the quarters and semis. Like, why don't we just wait for a moment and see what happens? But they seem to like him over there in the management side of City. I was
going to say
about
the
players.
Less so. So let's just talk about the other quarterfinals very quickly. So Man United beat Brighton 4-0. Nothing really unexpected there. I think there were some great goals from Man United. Brighton, I think, were probably tired from their game against Bristol City.
They wasted all their goals against Bristol City.
Exactly that. Chelsea beating Everton 1-0. I was actually quite shocked it was only 1-0. Not going to lie. Again, tired legs. Chelsea have got this insane stacked schedule.
Running low on forwards. Kat Macario has pulled her weight in her first few games. She's found the back of the net already, but a big loss from, now no Sam Kerr, no Mia Fischel. So Chelsea kind of trying to limp to the finish line right now, but so far so good.
And then obviously we mentioned Leicester taking down Liverpool. I think that was probably the most evenly matched quarterfinal that we had. And well done, Leicester. We've now got some debutantes in the semi-final because they've never made it that far before. So we'll talk about the week they had shortly. So that was a huge achievement for them to get that far. But obviously the game was Tottenham-Man City. Man City went ahead quite early on, and then Beth England doing Beth England things brought it back for Tottenham. And they ended up going through 4-3 on penalties. I will have to say this shows how much growth Tottenham have had, because they got absolutely hammered at the beginning of the season 7-0 by Man City. They lost the return fixture as well, and to be able to hold on, Becky Spencer made some insane saves to keep out Chloe Kelly. As someone pointed out, when was the last time Chloe Kelly's been denied from the spot?
Yeah, it was a poor penalty from Kelly, let's be honest. There were some poor penalties altogether, but you can't hit it all the time. And credit where credit is due, like you said, to Becky Spencer, she came up huge.
Yeah, maybe she's actually using her Jamaica form in the league. It's actually quite interesting. But again, Spurs are debutantes as well. So we've got 2 debutantes in the semi-finals. So it will be very exciting to see the draw and see who they get.
So you mentioned Leicester City and how much really they've improved. That game, Leicester City versus Liverpool, was arguably the most fun game to watch. Leicester City have had an unexpectedly good season. They've really climbed in the table, and they've been a team that I think everybody has been pulling for because they made the Great Escape, and now they're improving and they're climbing. And I guess I don't want this Willie Kirk news that we're about to get into to overshadow that and the players' achievement in that. But with that being said, massive news broke this past week that is just so incredibly frustrating and disappointing and raises a ton of questions around what is going on at Leicester City. So let's get into it.
Yeah, I think I sent you the article and just was like, when will it end? So for those who don't know, head coach Willie Kirk has been suspended under the allegation that he's had an inappropriate relationship with a player. By the sounds of it, it does sound like the player is of age, but obviously under his managementship, that means nothing.
It doesn't matter, but the only reason you're saying that is because recently we had an even worse allegation, which I think you were about to get into.
Exactly. So I was just making that clear that the player was of age, but it's still very, very inappropriate. And so he's been suspended while that's getting investigated. That is off of the back, obviously, the Sheffield United with Jonathan Morgan, who has now been let go from his position at Sheffield United due to what many have seen his involvement in the death of Maddie Cusack, who unfortunately passed away early last year. And an investigation has shown up that his behaviour towards her did not help her mental health, is probably the best way that I can phrase that.
And also within that investigation, what was uncovered was that he also had a 3-year relationship with a teenage player on his own team when he was at Leicester City. He came out and was saying, oh, well, she was 18, not 17, which, listen, that does not matter whatsoever. Incredibly inappropriate. So the Willie Kirk news also coming on the heels of all of that. Obviously, as I said, that relationship with Jonathan Morgan and the allegedly teenage player was at Leicester City.
It just, the fact that it happened at Leicester City again, and also stories came out that Jonathan Morgan they pre-warned Sheffield about him and they still took him on. It just shows that there is maybe we are getting our version of the NWSL report. And
yeah, I was just gonna say, I texted you, is this the WSL's moment? Is this the WSL's almost like Yates report moment where it's horrible, but everything that needs to be uncovered and made public is so that things can change? Because we said when this started being released in the NWSL, this is not NWSL specific. This is everywhere in the world. It's not senior level specific. It is everywhere. And here we go. Slowly but surely, it's starting to pop up more. And now twice within a very short period of time here in the WSL, I feel like I want to just dive into the Willie Kirk a bit and his background. He was at Everton from 2018 to 2021. He was sacked in 2021, I believe, after just 5 games of the WSL season, and Everton noted that it was because of a poor start, but the team had won 2 of 5 games. And let's just be totally honest here. For Everton, that's not an unusual start, right? Aston Villa went 0 for 5 this year and didn't sack their manager. So 2 out of 5 wins, sacking your manager for that early in the season. Now with this news coming out, I'm going back to that and being like, something smells here. Something smells like Everton didn't like whatever was happening and said, we're done with this. And Leicester City then signed him a year later, July of 2022.
Yep, so obviously that was to try and cover some bad results under Lydia Bedford. And so, yeah, like I said, he's been suspended. Assistant manager Jennifer Foster and first team coach Stephen Kirby are currently on the sidelines, and they will take charge while this investigation is ongoing.
This is just, I mean, what is there to say about this that we haven't already said, Allie? And I guess what's also important to note is that this is just, we're highlighting Leicester City right now. There's clearly a very intrinsic systemic issue at Leicester City, but there is also one in the WSL. And there's also one, which will come as no surprise to everybody, in the FA. Like,
are we surprised? No.
Are we surprised? Absolutely not. I'm sorry if this offends English people, but from my perspective here, the FA is one of the most notoriously misogynistic organizations. They literally banned women from playing football in the that you could really get. And so am I surprised that there are some very systemic issues within the FA? No. Have we even gotten to the tip of the iceberg? It breaks my heart, but absolutely not. I sincerely hope that this investigation is thorough and we learn what we need to learn and that the correct repercussions are taken. At least, I guess, the NWSL did set a precedent in terms of if something is uncovered, there's no suspension, there's no, part-time ban, you're done.
So speaking of misogyny, a story that's come to light, which hasn't really had that much coverage, to be honest.
I'm going to shout out Amy who sent this to me.
Yes, and it's come up a couple of times on my feed now. But Marta Cox versus the Panama Football Federation. It's come to a head. Let's be honest.
Yeah, this is... So let's just get into it. Marta Cox, if you don't know her, she's a 26-year-old midfielder who plays for the Panama national team. She plays her club soccer in La Liga MX for Tijuana. And it came out that she has threatened to quit the national team over comments made against her by the president of the Panamanian Football Federation. So let's rewind here and do this chronologically.
So Marta Cox has been one of the most outspoken, especially about the lack of funding that the women's team has received from the federation, including the fact that their facilities are beyond substandard. They've also had things where they've had to sleep in airports because hotels and things like that haven't been booked. And she basically said, we went to the World Cup and I don't see a general change. To compete, we need a good league. That has to be a change of a cycle. People believe in women's football in Panama, but obviously the federation does not.
So Panama had an early exit from the Gold Cup. They exited after the group stage. And we should note here, this is coming off of the best World Cup performance for Panama ever, which is what Marta Cox is referencing. Panama were one of the debutantes in the 2023 World Cup. That was the first time that team ever made it to the World Cup, and they did so with a lack of resources is probably an understatement, honestly. And so now they come into the Gold Cup and nothing has changed, and that's what she's commenting on. And then they go out in the group stages, and it was then that president of the Panamanian Football Federation, Manuel Arias, was quoted on video. This isn't like this was leaked audio. No, during a press conference on video, he calls Marta Cox, quote, fat and out of shape. The full quote here, obviously this is translated from Spanish into English, but it is, quote, Marta Cox stopped to talk about our league. She is out of shape. She is fat. She couldn't move on the field. We have to do mea culpa, and the players were not physically well. It's very easy to talk, but she doesn't know anything about the Panama League. For years, she doesn't know what's happening here. And that's in reference to Cox saying that there needs to be more investment in the domestic league. And she's right.
Oh, boy. It's just is. And it's just, I'm struggling for words for it because it's just, they've been called out for something that they've done. And then it's just like this low blow sort of,
Beyond a low blow. Like you said, it's misogyny. It's a misogynistic comment. It's a retaliation. And the retaliation is to comment on a woman's body and physique and say that she's out of shape and that's why Panama went out in the group stage and essentially go deal with your own stuff. We're fine over here, is what he's saying. It's misogynistic. It's sexist. I don't know what else there is to say about that. But the story's not done here.
Yeah. So after those comments about her appearance, she was asked if she had a response, and this is what she said. After the World Cup, I expected so much more. That desire to see steady progress led me to speak out after an unfortunate performance in the Gold Cup. she said in a statement through the Players Association. We are the first to recognise that we are not up to the standard of the tournament, but that same introspection must go beyond just the players. Personally, I feel that there were words used to describe me that certainly hurt me and were unexpected. If this type of situation becomes a constant, I will not return to defend the colours of the Panama national team.
I mean, the composure she had, how well she said that. I don't think I could respond that eloquently and that composed. That was beautifully said. I feel like at this point, Allie, I'm so out of things to say when things like this happen.
That's the thing, because it just keeps happening, and there's only so many times you can repeat yourself.
Right, exactly, and that's just how it is right now. We'll keep you updated, everybody, on this. Obviously, during the World Cup, we highlighted a lot of teams whose federations were not supporting them financially or other. And Panama was one of them. And so this is a continuation of highlighting that coverage as well, and how Marta Cox did a wonderful job of coming out and saying, hey, in this Gold Cup, I'd like to highlight the fact that nothing's changed here. We did the best this team has ever done, and this federation still refuses to invest in the women's side, in the domestic league on the women's side, just whatsoever. And that's sadly the story for a lot of nations whose funding and lack of funding, we'll say, that we covered during the World Cup. I guess I'm glad that it's come back around and we get to continue to highlight it here is the only thing that I'll say. But that's not due to this president and his stupidity and his stupid words. That's because somebody like Marta Cox thought to bring it into the spotlight. So I appreciate that. All right, let's end on that note. We've got WSL this coming weekend, everybody. It is back, baby. And not only that, what's kicking off, Allie?
Would it be the NWSL?
It's the NWSL. Next week, we get to do WSL and NWSL, so stay tuned. We'll be back on Wednesday for both and for the Women's Soccer Show. I've been Sarah.
And I've been Allie.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
This podcast was edited by Monkey Hill Media. Visit monkeyhillmedia.com for more information.